Welcome to SEC Sports Roundtable, basketball edition, we'll say. We're having a second podcast this week, so we want to welcome everyone that's going to get a little bit of extra dose of the roundtable this week. We're going to kick it off with some football news. Being middle of the week, there was some news in the SEC coming out, breaking news, we'll say. So we'll discuss some of that and what we think about that, and that'll save us time coming up on our football podcast that we do after the game Saturdays. So we're going to get into that. But first off, I want to welcome everybody to the podcast. I want to apologize up front. I think Drew pointed this out to me that I was saying Spotify. Go check us out on Spotify, and I probably said that a dozen times in our last podcast. Unfortunately, as much as I love Spotify, they stream music. They do not stream podcasts. We are on Stitcher Radio. It is an app on the iPhone and Android and other devices, as well as on your computer. So go to Stitcher, not Spotify. I apologize for that. I just love music as well. So football, basketball, and music are some of my passions. So I was all over Spotify. It's a great way to get some really cool music that you get to stream it for free. So you don't have to pay for it, and it's legal. So I take advantage of that, and I'd been listening to Spotify all day, and it was on my brain. They're so close. But it is Stitcher. The roundtable is on Stitcher. I'll say that as many times as I can today. Stitcher,
to make up for it. Yeah, you must have stock in Spotify. You're pumping them even though we get nothing out of it.
We get nothing for it, but it's a great service. So is Stitcher, as well as iTunes. That's another way to find us at SECSportsRoundtable.com, on Facebook as well, SEC Sports Roundtable, and on Twitter, SECSRT. That's all the ways to find us. We've got a new host here with us, and I'll just start off by introducing you. Matt Crawford, welcome aboard.
Glad to be here.
Thank you so much for being here. Also, we have Blair Smyly.
It's good to be back.
Thank you for being here. How was your trip to Starkville?
It was good, except for the loss, but good times.
Well, we understand that, and we'll cover that more in depth next week. And Drew, sitting across from me as always. Welcome, co-host.
Thank you, Shane Bailey. Glad to be here. Yeah. Glad to welcome a fellow not a fellow Kentucky fan, a Kentucky fan who I've had to listen to about the Wildcats for many months, waiting for basketball season.
We're excited it's finally here.
Anything to just get some distraction from this rancid football team.
Yeah, we've talked enough about that, and we're going to get the football news out of the way quick since we're talking about football, and we're going to quit talking about Kentucky football, and talk about a team that's really doing good in the SEC. That's got a couple of players that got suspended this week for failing a drug test.
Puff puff pass, right?
Well, it's been undisclosed as of right now what the actual
hopefully it
drug
was
choice
just
was.
Puff puff pass. If there's anything worse than that, then
I'm willing to
game suspensions probably.
I'm willing to go out on a pretty long stick and say that that's what it was. It might be a rolled stick. You take your pick on how it was, but I'm guessing that's the drug of choice there, and it makes sense that that's what it was. But I think you've got the story pulled up, Drew. I'll let you talk about it for a minute.
Yeah, the big news is my favorite player, Tyrann Mathieu. And
let me just interject. If you want to know how much he loves this gentleman, go listen to last week's podcast. He talks nothing but praise about Mathieu. So
he's a very, very good player. I am very impressed with his play on the field. He's a little punk though. He runs his mouth after every single play. So as a non-LSU fan, it kind of rubs you the wrong way. I don't think he had a good game against Tennessee. I'll repeat that one more time. I think he kind of got abused, but as Matt asked me before, if they voted for SEC player or defensive player of the year right now, absolutely think that Tyrann Mathieu is a defensive player of the year. But here's the news: is he's not playing against Auburn. And add to that, running back Spencer Ware also out for the game against Auburn, and I think that's a big blow. Do I think it's enough to prevent them from winning the game? Probably not, but I think it's definitely takes it from a 3-touchdown game to something that's a little bit closer.
Blair, you got?
Yeah, I would add that I think they're still gonna roll Auburn, but losing Ware and Mathieu, it's a big deal. I think it's they still haven't disclosed if it's going to be more than one game. So Definitely something to keep an eye on.
And there was a third person, Simon, was also one of the ones that they believe is the third individual for LSU that was suspended. So they're losing 3 players. I think the biggest one is Matthew because they're pretty loaded in the running back position. They've got some capable people to come in and fill those shoes of Ware, even though he's top-notch running back in the SEC. LSU's able to rebuild, and they've got some depth in running back. So for one game, and it's Auburn, I don't think that's going to be a huge issue for those guys.
I'm just going to say, guys, I think it's going to be just a little bit closer than everybody thinks. I think it's more like a 10-point game. I think, obviously, LSU still has the talent, but I just think Auburn has surprised some people this year a little bit better. It's a home game for Auburn, is it?
No, it's
at LSU. It's out at LSU.
Yeah.
Might take that back.
No,
but
LSU. Like I said, 16-point game.
Yeah, 23.
Yeah.
No, I agree with you, Matt. For if you listen to the podcast, I think I was one of the only one of the hosts to pick Auburn to cover that game, and I still, I just soon have all the players on the field. I want to watch the best players play, but for just the small part of me that wants to catch up in our picks contest, then it definitely helps.
The bad news for you is the line will be adjusted by the time you get to Vegas.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't. This is a game I would not touch, and based off my record, which I do think I still have a winning record, I'm not comfortable picking these games. I'll stick to like the Mountain West Conference and things like that, the late at night games where you can just hope, and there's no reason you're really even watching that game except for you got money on it.
San Diego State playing San Jose State or something like that.
Yeah, the Hawaii game, the gambler's last chance, as I like to call it. So there is a game, I think, in Hawaii while we're down there, so I'll be trying to win some money back at close to midnight.
Yeah. Talking about LSU, one thing I found that was actually a pretty interesting thing this week, did you know that since the Auburn game's at 2:30 and then the Arkansas game's at 2:30, that this will be the first year since 1935 that they will not play a night game at LSU?
I did see that somewhere.
And so I thought, man, I was just both basically took me back. It just kind of shows how dominant they are, that they pretty much have had a 2:30 game whenever it's been home this year. But
they had an 11 o'clock against Kentucky.
Yeah.
So they had that one as well.
Yeah, Mississippi State's getting good at those 11-21 kickoffs as well. So.
Well, that's the flip side to being a really good team. I mean, everybody loves a night game in Baton Rouge, but they're so good this year when they're playing at home. CBS picks that game, so
yeah. I mean,
and
if
they
you're
get
good,
first choice and they
you're
get
playing
that
at 2:30. If you're terrible, you're playing at 11.
Jefferson Pilot it's not the Jefferson Pilot game anymore.
If you're halfway decent, you play at 6 every Saturday.
When is the CBS contract up? Did it get renewed with everything else?
I think so. I think they've got a long-term contract with the SEC as well.
I think it runs right along with ESPN's. That's why the whole Missouri thing's fixing to open up the whole TV package and redo everything again.
I'd like to see them do something. I mean, because the ratings on that 8 o'clock game or 7 o'clock here in the Central Time Zone at ABC is always, that's a primetime game that everybody is able to watch. And, that 2:30 game, you got yard stuff to have to do in the middle of October. I mean, I've got some land. I've got leaves out there that are just falling every day, and I look at it and I go,
Shane, you have yard work. I just get yelled at by my wife in the middle of it.
I was going to say, I don't think Drew's doing any yard work during the 2 o'clock game.
I'm not saying I'm doing the yard work. I'm just saying it's there, and I know that it's in the back of my mind that that's not getting done because I'm sitting here watching football. Where if it's a 6 or 7, 8 o'clock game, I don't have those worries,
Now, ABC, who do they have that? Is that still Big 12 and something contracted, right? Because, I mean, it's an ABC, it's an ESPN ABC deal, but I know it's one that Herb Street and all them do, but it's not necessarily College Game Day / anything else.
I can't remember what game. I feel like there's been different conferences playing on that ABC.
Yeah. I mean, the SEC's played one early in the season. They had
I feel like they did too.
They have a CBS doubleheader.
Yeah.
It's like always like the
but
third
that doesn't,
week.
Yeah, but ABC, like the first week, wasn't the LSU-Oregon game.
Yeah, but was that on ABC?
ABC, because then ESPN had the Georgia-Boise State game.
It might be, yeah.
So, I mean, LSU was on there for the ABC game. So, I mean, the SEC has been on that game. So, I mean, I'd love...
It could have been the opening kickoff against Boise State or something.
Because it was a non-conference.
Starts to like the third week, right, or something like that.
Correct.
Which is always
Tennessee, Florida
game.
Opens it up.
And then like the next week or the following, they have a doubleheader always. But It's just like after that second week, there's never going to be a chance an SEC school has been on there will actually get on that channel for some reason. So there's got to be something there. It's probably obvious and we don't know it.
Well, there was one other suspension, and we'll hit that real quickly. It's not a huge loss for either team, but Georgia lost 2 players, Sean Williams and Kwan Gathers, I believe is how you pronounce that name. And then Vanderbilt lost their center, Logan Stewart. And all 3 of those individuals received half-game suspensions for the brawls and plays that took place at the Georgia-Vanderbilt game.
I'm just excited that those thugs at Vanderbilt are finally, paying for some of their mistakes. They've been trying to get away with this stuff for years, and the SEC is not going to take it anymore.
Yeah, they're more than just brains at Vanderbilt is what you're saying, right?
Something
or they've
like
just
that.
been so smart they've gotten away with it for this many years.
No, I'm just trying to joke that Vanderbilt never does anything wrong, and they finally do something. They get a chop block and the guy suspended. So
well, and their coach didn't receive anything from either side. So that's about it on the suspension side. And that's about it for the football side. Is there?
That is tough though. I mean, and this is going to kind of not to go off topic because I know we're talking about basketball, but it goes along with the NFL with the Jim Schwartz and Harbaugh incident after the game. They don't get fined. And it's just weird. It's like I feel like they should hold coaches to higher standards than players, but I feel like we do the exact opposite and hold them to lower standards.
Well, speaking of that, did you see where Muschamp came out and apologized for using profanity, but he's not going to go crazy on the sideline?
Told him there's kind of unwritten rules. Number one, Muschamp, you can actually say what you want to say. And you can actually cuss doing it, but if you're actually saying it directly to his face, it's totally different than actually looking
the other way
else and doing it. I mean, you can get your point across, and Muschamp's drawn a line, and it's a guy that's in his first year, and it's being caught. Now, I am not of the opinion that there's any way, shape, or form that if I was a Florida fan, I'd be really upset that they actually aired that unedited portion of him almost mic'd up with that sideline mic. That was the most ridiculous thing ever because he didn't know that, and I think there's a code that you ought to allow coaches that stuff should be kind of where it is, and the fact that they kind of unleashed that I thought was kind of irresponsible by the TV crew. But
well, I mean, even when you've got those coaches and players that are mic'd up, they've got a huge edit room that's just going to town right there as soon as it's happening.
But they at least know it.
Yes.
They know that they've got a microphone on them, and he, there's that sideline. I think that's why they did it. But I thought that was just. I mean, I don't care about Florida. I don't care about Will Muschamp. But I was sitting there going, and I think he's overreacting, and that's just the way he's going to be. But when you're a head coach, you should be able to control it somewhat. And getting back to your Georgia Vanderbilt game, what I don't understand is, number one, I think they're both in the wrong. I think Franklin should never, even if a kid's being a punk like that kid was being, and kind of saying stuff to him, especially right after the game, there's no way, shape, or form Franklin should ever say anything to the player. But whatever Todd Grantham did was absolutely ridiculous. The fact that an assistant coach would get into a verbal altercation, I guarantee you there's football coaches across the country that their assistant coaches would never say a word to another opposing head coach. It's just not etiquette. Mm-hmm. And the fact that he just lost it like a complete crazy redneck. I mean, he was just losing his mind. But
I agree with you.
Weird.
Yeah, I agree with you on the point. Franklin should never approach another player from another school, because that's similar to somebody coming up to your son or daughter and wanting to say something after a game. You're going to go and defend them. So right. That's I think that's an unwritten rule.
I don't think you'll find another coach that if another coach from an opposing team comes over and says something to your player that you're not going to back up your player no matter if he's wrong or right, just because they've said something. But to kind of take it to the level they did and for nothing to actually happen to them some way, shape, or form is just kind of ridiculous.
I think it also goes to the time that we live in, because, I mean, everything is recorded. I mean, we're recording, talking, a bunch of guys sitting around talking about football or basketball or whatever. I mean, whatever you say these days with Twitter, I mean, you just react and it's out there and it's never coming back. And there's cameras everywhere. There's audio everywhere. There's even unedited audio from the conversation with Franklin and Rick after the game. that Channel 4 has
Yeah.
and was released by Sports by Brooks. I'll give him the credit since that's where I found it today. But I mean, Rick basically says, yeah, that's what I thought happened.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
And there were some words said in between all that, but I mean, no matter what you say, it's going to be out there, especially in an environment like you are having college football today in the SEC.
And to be honest with you, I don't blame Franklin, because Franklin, I mean, I kind of like the fact that he's on the edge, and I think at Vanderbilt you got to be on that edge. Yeah. And it showed everybody that they're not going to back down from anything, and he's going to go straight at you. But I just thought it was kind of weird. I mean, when I first saw it, it made Georgia look in a bad slot, and then you actually kind of find the whole story that. But it was kind of interesting because Grantham was going crazy, but he was backing up. If you watch the video, Franklin was just standing dead straight there, and he just had this expression on his face like, "Try it, just come at me," because he wasn't even moving. So it was kind of an interesting thing.
Yeah, I mean, like just to wrap it up, I think that the problem is like I said, the coaches should be held to a higher standard than the players, and you've got players that are suspended, and I'm not saying you should suspend the coaches, but hit them in their pocketbook, right?
Yeah,
checkbook. I guess not a pocketbook. They're not women, so. Well, we are talking about the Vandy and Georgia coaches, so
let's just say wallet.
Yeah, the wallet. Is that what it's called? Sorry. Wallet. I don't have any money, so I don't know.
That's gender neutral, right?
Yes.
All right. Well, that's going to do it for our football segment. That 5 minutes quickly turned into more than that. So, you got a good football dose, and it's good conversation. So we're not going to apologize for that. But the main reason we're here is to give you a little bit of preview on the basketball season. Last week was the madness, we'll call it. Whatever team that you're for. Whether it's big blue or orange or maroon or red or black or crimson. What other colors are we missing? Blue and orange. What's Florida call theirs?
Blue and orange.
Blue and orange.
I believe you had it right there, Shane.
Yeah. So
some schools don't have this madness. Some schools decide to just try to go quietly because they don't have too much to pump up. Tennessee, I mean,
LSU basically are trying to give away tickets for their first home game. It's so bad right now, and we'll talk about where they fall into this scheme of things. But, we'll start off with a little bit of news in that, over the offseason, the SEC decided to change the way that the SEC tournament is seeded. It was always seeded with the number ones in the East and West getting the byes and seeding the East and West individually. And they've done away with that, and it's basically a 1 through 12 seeding.
It's about time.
It's about time?
Yeah, I agree. When you look at last year, the disarray that you had out in the West and more power in the East. Now, granted that the East wasn't the Big East by any stretch of the imagination, but the SEC East was much better than the West. So to have that level playing field, I think this is what they had to go to.
It's just a more fair way to do it. You've got the top 4 getting byes. 5 plays 12, 6 plays 11. I think that's the way the women do it. They
had it right.
Yeah, the women had it right, and the men just kind of followed suit. I think that's the fairest way to do it.
I think it's terrible.
Yeah, Mississippi State fan, what do you think?
Of course.
I've always enjoyed that 1-2 seed bye going to the tournament. Now, Stansbury was actually the only coach that voted against it, so he was 1 against 11. But I do think so. I mean, I think that the East was obviously the dominant, and West was truly down last year. But there have been times where the West is, you can go back to the Alabama days when they were kicking it, and the East was down as well. So it's kind of been one of those things that kind of goes back and forth. But I definitely think for basketball, it is probably the right thing to do.
Well, with homage to that, we're going to basically go in 12-1 order based on some different people out there and websites and ranking sites on how they've got everybody ranked. Our opinions might vary just a little bit on some of these, but for the sake of just having an order, this is what we're going to go with. And we're going to start off with I guess one of the only 2 teams that has a new coach, and that's going to be the South Carolina Gamecocks.
No, they don't have a new coach.
No.
Darren Horn, he's still there.
Did he still? Oh, see, all that rumor stuff, it was in my head that he was gone.
Hot seat, but still there.
Yeah, I think South Carolina's I mean, I agree that they'll be the last in the SEC this year. I mean, their best player is playing football right now.
That's right.
It's actually about to get more running back heavy since Lattimore's out. So, they've got a couple of good recruits that have actually come on this year, but they're just, their best two players were, left last year, and there's not much that's going to be happening this year, I believe.
Yeah, if you take a look at their top 3 leading scorers last year, you had Bruce Ellington, Sam Muldrow, and Ramon Galloway. You just mentioned Ellington. You probably won't see him on the basketball court until January. And then you take away their big man, Sam Muldrow, and Ramon Galloway.
But don't let Spurrier talk about that 8 months after it happens.
Oh, that's right. So it's hard. I mean, when you're losing roughly 33, 34 points a game, how are you going to replace that? Probably with some guys that we've never heard of.
Damian Leonard is the kid that's supposed to be by far their best recruit that they actually receive. So,
yeah, I mean, I think we're talking about just a team that's rebuilding, and it's tough when your best player decides to play football, and he's pretty good at it too. So it's
quality time on the field.
You can't blame him for wanting to do that. But yeah, I mean he's coming back. He'll play in the second half of the season, and he can shoot lights out. So he'll be there for SEC season to scare some people.
He's the one guy that can wreak havoc on the basketball court. He can get to the rim. He can cause mismatches. He's a quick guy. Kind of like the other
Devin Downey clone, right there,
kind of like a Devin Downey who played for about 18 years just a little while ago. So
I thought he was still there.
He is. He's Bruce Ellington.
That's where he wears a Bruce Ellington.
Same guy.
Well, we're not going to spend a whole lot of time down here at the bottom, and so we're going to just keep moving on. The next one on our list is going to be the LSU Tigers. Again, I think I mentioned that it's looking pretty bad down there, that they didn't have the madness either, and that they were even giving away tickets here to their first home game to try to spark some interest down there in Baton Rouge. They're more worried about football right now.
Yeah, I mean the thing about it is when they hired Trent Johnson, I was like, man, that's a good hire, because LSU has just got a ton of talent. It's like football. I mean, their state, especially the Baton Rouge area, has a ton of basketball talent, and I thought that he was going to be a guy. He seems to be pretty stubborn, and he's going to be his way. Is going to work his way or not, and so far he's had some struggles, but. I think he's got – I don't really know. I mean, he's got a really good player coming in Johnny O'Brien. That was a top 20 player. But you still got Storm Warren, who we said's got the best name in the SEC. And there's who's the other one? They got the Malcolm White kid that actually transferred from Ole Miss.
Yeah.
That was supposed to really, I thought, play better last year, but he didn't. So, I mean – they've got a chance to be better than what they were last year. They were pretty bad last year.
I think
but they're not going to be.
The kind of scary thing is, they had was John Brady. Was that their coach?
Yeah.
And they kind of ran him off and weren't too happy with. I mean, LSU was a weird team. I mean, they had so much talent and it seems like they underperformed quite a bit under Brady. And they bring in Johnson, and I agree. I thought that was a good hire, and they really haven't done what you would want them to do yet. So. It's kind of one of those things where you think the grass is going to be greener, you're gonna just automatically get better, and they really haven't done it under Johnson. I think he's on the hot seat now.
Well, and John Brady wasn't that bad of a coach. He took the team to the Final Four not that long ago. But the thing about LSU is they're a really young team. Their top 2 scorers from last year were both freshmen, so they both returned. You've got Ralston Turner, and you've also got Andre Stringer. So 2 guys who can score the ball, 12.3 and 11.2 points a game. So you've got that coming back. Build on top of that with some transfers and also some good recruits, and you might have the makings of a mid-level SEC team.
Could be.
Is it so? Does Johnson? Does he have to get to the tournament to keep his job? Then you said he's possibly on the hot seat.
I think he's got to show improvement. I just don't. I think this is going to be very tough for this team to make the tournament.
I do too.
I don't think that's realistic.
I think Malcolm White's got to play better. I think Johnny O'Brien's got to be a hit. That little guard Stringer was pretty tough, and the other one that you mentioned.
Turner.
But I remember Stringer was was a pretty decent kid there, but they just were inexperienced. I mean, they had injury issues last year that really created a problem for them. But I don't see them getting, finishing fifth maybe in the West at best.
Yeah, and expectations are so low right now. I don't think Trent Johnson has much to worry about. They're more focused on football, so
there's no Pete Maravich walking through that door.
That's right.
Well, we'll just keep moving on from LSU. The Go Tigers, and they're gonna do well in football, and they'll start worrying about basketball. Sometime in February, because they're going to be playing in mid-January. When is the championship game? I mean, is it January 30th this year? I mean, they keep pushing it back and pushing it back.
For the football,
yeah.
January 14th.
So, I mean, they're going to be in the heart of the SEC play before people are going to start worrying about LSU. We're going to stay in the West and look at the Auburn Tigers. And I'm going to take a second here, and we talked about, in our pre-show prep, this is a better SEC than it was last year. I think the West is going to be a little more improved, and it's going to be a notch above. It's still not going to be the Big East, I think somebody said. Was that you, Matt?
Yeah.
The SEC is not the Big East, and it's never going to be with 35,000 teams in there playing basketball.
For now.
Now.
Yeah, the Big East is crumbling. So
it is. It's a house of cards, and someone just took the Queen of Hearts, I think.
But you're never going to confuse the two, I think, is what you're saying. So
exactly.
I agree with that.
And it's a much improved team, and Auburn's rebuilding. This is a big rebuilding year for them. Second-year coach, am I correct? This time with the coaching
Tony
situation?
Barbie.
Yeah. So he's putting the blocks in place, getting that foundation laid for Auburn. But we'll talk a second about those guys next.
Yeah, you mentioned Tony Barbie being a John Calipari assistant coach a few years back. Did some good things at UTEP, and I think he's going to slowly build that up here at Auburn. It's going to take time. This is same as LSU. This is a football school first and foremost. So it's going to take some time to get some recruits in there, get the fan base excited again about basketball. But they can do it. All it takes is one or two good recruits to come in and stay for 3-4 years to get you back on the right track.
It also helps to have probably one of the nicer facilities in the SEC with their new arena, and they did it, I think, pretty smart. They actually lowered the size of it from a seating standpoint from about 12,000 to about 9,500 to 10,000, and put a lot of amenities into it. So one thing they do, they've got facilities, and it's Auburn, but it's hard to win there in basketball. They just they're not as passionate about it as they are about football. So, but Barbie is a good coach. He did some good things at UTEP, and but it's what we said about Trent Johnson.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's going to take some time, and Auburn needs some stability there. But it's not really anything that I see that I think they're gonna be fighting LSU in that West.
Yeah, I think that they're definitely at the bottom of the West, and they've got a ladder to climb. They're just not there. I mean, they're just watching some of their games last year. They just were depleted with talent, and I think they've got to just build up. And it might be a couple years, but I just can't get excited about their season coming up.
Good news is they're returning their top 4 players, so there's not much to get excited about, but
stability.
At least you have that.
Yeah. And as I'm looking through these teams, one thing you're going to see is these weaker teams and lower in the SEC are also, if you look at their preseason opponents, they're not scheduling. That's something else that I think's changed over the last 6-7 years in basketball. Is you always had those cream puffs the first half of the season before you really got into the tournament play, and you're really starting to see some of those more elite top 25, top 30 teams scheduling harder teams that are out of conference games, and we'll cover some of those. I mean, Vandy's got Oregon first game.
Yeah, and I mean that's kind of been the MO. I mean, you've got to they started penalizing you for that in the NCAA tournament, not having the schedules to match. So a lot of teams have been forced to go and do that. So if you got a young team and inexperienced,
you just got to go for wins. I mean, because like I said, Vanderbilt opens up with Oregon. Auburn is McNeese State. That's the difference in the level of quality of play there. We'll talk about flipping back over to the east again, and Drew's Tennessee Volunteers. I think you're now a Kentucky fan for basketball. So, but
That's erroneous. I'm a big Orange fan. Never jump off the bandwagon. Just trying to get y'all's hopes up for having a new fan. The Big Orange, man, this is a tough one to swallow, though. My probably favorite coach that we've ever had in any sport. I mean, I love Bruce Pearl. I still do. I think it's a raw deal that he got. Probably shouldn't have lied, but one small white lie and he's out of coaching. That's kind of tough, but
it's a lie that's built on another lie that's built on another lie.
Yeah.
But he's found a good landing spot.
Yeah, I mean, he went from making $2 million a year coaching to I don't know how much. He probably makes a lot of money for this logistics company that he works for now, but who knows, man? That's tough. I still think I wish that Tennessee would have fought for him a little bit more because I don't know what we've got with. Talk about a new coach. Here's one of them. Conzo Martin is a new coach, and I think he's going to be a good coach. He's the opposite of Bruce Pearl, though. Tennessee seems to kind of go back and forth. You got Kevin O'Neill, who is slow down. I remember watching a basketball half where they were in single digits at halftime with Kevin
O'Neill.
O'Neill.
Any kids behind the bench.
Exactly. And then you go to like Jerry Green, who's a more up tempo, and then you've got Buzz Peterson, who's a little, he's no good. And then you get Bruce Pearl, who's once again up tempo, shoot threes, press. They kind of got out of that a little bit because they didn't have the talent, and now you've got a guy that really stresses defense, and I think that's a smart move. Martin knows that Tennessee's not going to win with offense right now, and the only way they're going to compete is with defense. So he really, in practices, they haven't run offensive sets. I mean, they've been only working on defense. They come out to their there was no orange madness for Tennessee. I think we had 300 people watching the practice. They come out wearing 10-pound vests just to try to pump them up for conditioning, get them better. One thing about this team is the only way you're gonna get to play is if you're playing 100%. And I do like that, but as far as watching fun basketball and being able to text back and forth with Matt during Tennessee Kentucky games, we're not going to have that now. I mean, it's Tennessee's back to they're rebuilding, which is tough to see.
Cupboard's bare.
Yeah. Well, it's tough, and only in basketball can you see this. You can build up, and in football it's going to take 2 or 3 years. In basketball, you can go from nothing to a Sweet 16 team in 1 year with a good recruiting class, and you can vice versa. You can take a team that's made the NCAA tournament 4 or 5 years in a row.
I can relate.
Yeah,
I can relate. So the thing about Tennessee is there's not much to get excited about this year. Before you had your Scotty Hobsons, you had Tobias Harris coming in, who was a top 10 recruit. So I mean you had some guys in place that you could kind of get behind, root for, and you could say, hey, we could surprise some teams this year and be a top 25 team. You don't have that going into this season with Tennessee. So they're running out 6 new freshmen, most of which nobody's heard of before. So, and with losing your seniors, your Melvin Goins and your Scotty Hobsons and Tobias to the pros, I know they're not seniors, but you lose that excitement, you lose that opportunity.
Sure, and what a lot of people don't realize is you knew that Tennessee was graduating Melvin Goins and Brian Williams, but there was a point you're not sure if Tobias Harris and Scotty Hobson are going pro. When Bruce Pearl was still there, I was leaning to one of them going pro and the other one coming back because I don't think they meshed really well together on the court at the same time. But with Bruce Pearl leaving, Tennessee at that point also had they had Chris Jones, who was a top 25 recruit, I think, or top 30 maybe, and they had Kevin Ware, I believe is his name, who committed to Tennessee, then he committed to like Georgia, then he committed to Louisville, and then he went somewhere else. I don't know. Is he at Louisville?
Yeah, he committed to Central Florida, then flip-flopped back to Louisville.
Yeah, so I mean so they lose their two top 60 recruits. I mean, they had a top 25 recruiting class and lost both of them. So Martin came in and just said, "Hey, I got to get some players," and he got a lot of the people. And it's a tough pill to swallow when you're getting guys like Tobias Harris, who's committed to Tennessee on ESPNU, down between Syracuse and Tennessee, and now all of a sudden you're getting guys who only had offers from Missouri State and mid-majors.
But part of that is he came in late to the game. I mean,
Well, yes, but I mean, here's my thing. I'm a former banker, unemployed guy with a podcast that we're doing our 14th podcast in Nashville, Tennessee, versus a guy that's clearly good enough to evaluate talent to be the head coach of a major university. I've got to say he knows more about basketball than I do, and I just got to hope that he he's
Well,
done his due diligence.
What I actually take from it is being a college basketball fan. I remember Konzo Martin playing at Purdue, and he was a guy that you sat there and watched that you kind of rooted for because he was a guy that got every bit of his talent. I mean, he just squeezed everything that he had out, and so that's what his MO has been as a coach, is that he can actually take that kid and turn them into something. Now, he's going to be totally disciplined. It's going to be a total different game. And this year, it's one of those things where you're just going to have to be patient. I think this year and possibly next year, but, he could be the kind of guy that gets in there and in the SEC and can put together some pretty impressive run, I think.
And you can win games slugging it out with the slower defensive tempo. I mean, Tubby Smith did it for 10 years, so it can be done.
And I think he will open it up once it all depends on the type of players. I think he's a good enough coach. I mean, Purdue is a Big Ten slug it out type of place, but when they had the big dog and all those going, when they had players, they had a good offense, and so I don't think it's going to be necessarily just we're going to beat you up. I think going forward, Tennessee will play you hard and they will play you defense, and that's just going to be part of a standard that's going to be there.
Well, one good thing and one not so good thing. The good thing is, as opposed to like an Auburn that we're talking about, Tennessee still has some 4-star athlete recruits in there. Trey Golden was a top recruit. Jordan McRae, they didn't show a lot last year, but they're very talented basketball players. Kenny Hall is a very talented basketball player. Jerron Mayman, very talented basketball player.
Skylar McBee.
Skylar McBee has a horrible mustache. Now, whether or not that, he looks like Pete Maravich, man. Maybe he can play like him. The negative, man, talk about a schedule. They're playing Duke. They're going. I have no idea if Oakland's going to be good, but they were good last year. I can tell you that.
The Raiders.
The Oakland Raiders, yeah, Oakland, which is like not in California.
It's in Michigan, I believe.
The Michigan Oakland.
We found that out last year.
But they play at Oakland, which now all of a sudden looks like a tough game. Playing Pittsburgh, always play at Memphis, UConn. Say what you want about Bruce Pearl. That guy scheduled some hard games. And what stinks is I've always, as just a huge college basketball fan, I've always wanted to play Duke. That's the team. And we play Kentucky every year. We've played North Carolina. We've played Kansas. The one team that really I feel like Tennessee hadn't played is Duke, and we get them in Maui this year. So, yeah, excited about that.
Good draw by you.
Yeah.
Well, you said what a difference a year can make. And, Kentucky proved that last year with Harrelson. We were –
y'all love Harrelson, man.
George.
He's good, but
how can you not?
Y'all love him.
But I'm just talking about what a difference a year makes.
Absolutely.
From his junior to senior year. Now, granted, he was playing in scrimmages against Enos Kanter, and that's top-level talent that he had to go up against every day in practice that helped make him better. But, he put a lot of work into it, and Kentucky wouldn't have been the team they were, especially with Kanter not coming back or being eligible. That would have really put Kentucky in a hard position if Harrelson was the same player he was as a junior or only slightly better.
Sure.
So you've got that to look forward to. You're completely right.
No, there's some players that I get excited about. If Mayman can be conditioned a little bit better. And I'll go ahead and tell you this. The guy was it was the worst free throw shooting I've ever seen. I think he was like in the you see Shaq, everybody makes fun of him, but Shaq was still like a 50-something% free throw shooter. This guy was like a 30-something%, like 34%, and that's like what I would shoot, I think. Hopefully I could even do better than that, but that really hurts when you get a guy that is that much of a liability. And Blair, you played, some college basketball. If you get a guy that shoots 34%, just foul him, You'll take your chances of him at the line. He'll miss both of them, and it's like a turnover.
Yeah. All right. Anything else before we...
Is that enough talking about a team that might go 4-12 in the SEC?
They might go 6-4, 6-10, if I can do math in my head. We'll move on to one of the two teams in the good state of Mississippi. I see the burgundy. Right. Not to go off topic too far, but the Egg Bowl jersey for Mississippi State came out. Did you see that?
I did. I like it.
A little gold. I thought it was looking a little sharp. Now the thing is, if you lose you're gonna have to burn them, and it's like Michigan's against Michigan State. Adidas brought up those just kick butt uniforms. I thought they were super sharp, and Michigan lays an egg, and no a pun to the Egg Bowl, but they didn't perform real well against a team in Michigan State they should have beat. But enough about the uniforms. We'll get to the Ole Miss Rebels, though. That's the team we'll talk about now, because Mississippi State will come further on down the road here. They're a little more improved. So we've got the Ole Miss Rebels to talk about now. You want?
Yeah, I tell you what, guys. I mean, I hate Ole Miss. Obviously, y'all know that. But I tell you what, this is going to be the most experienced team Andy Kennedy's got. Kennedy is one of those guys. He's been there 5 years, and they've gone to the NIT 4 times. He hadn't been to the NCAA tournament. They got really heated last year on him. But it's kind of one of those deals they're dealing with in football right now. That is the contract issues. I mean, the guy. I think if they would have let him go last year, they had to pay almost $4 million for a buyout. They didn't renew his deal, but they didn't change the buyout. So this year, he'll still have a little bit of a somewhat of a hefty buyout if he doesn't go successful. But I expect him to be better this year. I could see them actually jumping up in the top 3 in the West, possibly maybe in the top 6 or 7 in the a little bit better than what we got them here at 8th. But they've got a front court with Buckner, Cox, and Terrence Henry that they're all going to have back. It's going to be probably their most deep front court that they've had. Now they're going to lose Chris Warren, which when you lose a guy like that can come in as a freshman, average about 19 points and stay 4 years and do some of the things that he did. I mean, he's kind of been Ole Miss basketball for the last 4 years. But they have got Jalen Kendrick, who's a transfer from Michigan, is the first McDonald's All-American at Ole Miss. He'll be eligible in January.
He's a good player.
He is, and they'll lose. I think they'll miss the Zach Graham. A lot of people don't even realize who he was, but I think they'll miss him on the backcourt. But they've got a couple of good kids coming in. They've got Murphy Holloway, that's coming back. So that was kind of a strange story. Most people don't know is that he's from South Carolina. He went to Ole Miss. He played 2 years. He wanted to go back to South Carolina because he had a child and wanted to be closer. He spent last year at South Carolina and decided he wanted to come back to Ole Miss. So he got a waiver, and he's just now, I think within the last week, been cleared to play. So he'll be a huge jump for them as well. So, I think this could be what is their other guard?
Drake Nelson.
Yeah, I can't ever say his name. But he came on last year with Warren and really kind of stepped in. And of course, they have this Nick Williams kid that, was a transfer as well. And he was supposed to be, kind of better from last year, but he didn't really, he never really kind of got going. He got into SEC play and got a little bit lost. But, there's a lot of upside with him as well. So, if they got some things fall right, they could be pretty tough. They could be a team that can kind of sneak up on a lot of people, I think.
It's never easy losing a guy like Chris Warren, 19.1 points a game, kind of the catalyst for the entire offense up there, or down there, I should say. But like you said, they're going to be able to spread the ball around a little bit more. You get, Henry in there, Nelson, Buckner, and you got some guys that can really contribute. So it is going to be tough to make up 20 points a game, but I think they got some guys coming in that can step in and fill those roles.
Yeah, and that's tough. I mean, it's not just 20 points a game. You remember pretty much any close game they had, it was incredible the situations they put Warren in. I mean, they just gave him the ball and said, "You got to do it for us." I remember him just heaving up,
half court shot against Kentucky.
I mean, and he didn't get a lot of good looks toward the end. So the negative is you lose that leadership. The positive is now you don't have that one guy, and you can really let people grow as basketball players. And I do think they have talent. I think that's the one thing about Ole Miss is finally they're not just that one, that one player. They're going back to where it can spread out, and you might have multiple guys averaging double digits. So.
But the thing is, I've had high expectations for Ole Miss for the last couple of years, and they haven't lived up to those. So it's going to be a big deal to see if they can take that next step forward, so to speak, and move on and do something, make it to the NCAA tournament, win a game or two. I think that's what expectations should be for Ole Miss this year. I don't think they're a Sweet 16 team, but if they can make it to the tournament, win a game, win 2 games, that's something to build on.
Well, you said something in there, moving on, and that's what we're going to do. We're going to go on and leave the Ole Miss Rebels and next head back over to the East. a little flip-flopping. It seems like it's almost every other one we're flip-flopping back and forth. But next up, we're going to talk about the Georgia Bulldogs.
Man, I think the first thing you got to say about Georgia is they lost their two best players. They lost Leslie and Tompkins, and that's going to be tough to overcome. And I think in a tougher East, so there's clearly a top three in the East, and then it's that battle for the next position. So I guess the question is, can they replace all the stats they're getting out of Tompkins and Leslie? And I think that's just going to be tough for them.
Yeah, not only did they lose Tompkins and Leslie, but they lost Jeremy Price and Chris Barnes, who were, if you watch them play, were very critical pieces to kind of what they did. I mean, they got Gerald Robinson and Dustin Ware, which is basically the backcourt is there. They're gonna have to rely heavily on, and then they got the big newcomer coming in, Kentavious. He's got a double last name, Caldwell Pope. But he's supposed to be the real deal. That'll go from day one. But I just see, we just got finished talking about Ole Miss, and when I start looking at Georgia and Ole Miss, I start going, the reason I think Georgia's there is because they've got some experience of playing in some big time games, and Ole Miss just hasn't lived up to. But I could see this flip flop easily. I could see Georgia being in that bottom four before it's all over with, or I could kind of see them staying about middle of the pack. So it's just kind of all how they take good. I mean, Fox is going to be a good coach, but they're definitely losing a ton.
Yeah, I agree. It's just on paper, when you look at the losses of Trey Tompkins and Travis Leslie, two guys who had the ball in their hands for the majority of the games, it's going to be tough to lose that scoring. You're also talking about two guys who averaged over 7 rebounds a game. You expect that out of Trey Tompkins, but you forget Travis Leslie, great rebounder, good size, most of the time the best athlete on the floor at any given time. So to replace those, that's tough. I don't really see it happening. I do like Ware. I do like Caldwell Pope coming in this year, and I like the coach. I like Mark Fox, but I think he's got his work cut out for him this year at Georgia.
Yeah, Dustin Ware was a good player for him last year. I remember Tennessee games. You think if you can control that Tompkins and Leslie, you're pretty much set. But yeah, he's a senior this year, so they're going to have some leadership there, and to get the number 12 ranked player in the nation, a commitment with the Pope kid. That's just you hope if he can play. I mean, when you're talking about top 15 recruits, these kids can really be program changers, and if this kid pans out, then they don't skip a beat. They're back to where they're competing to get into the tournament.
We'll go on to we through with Georgia. Anything else? Okay. Another one we're going to talk about is going to protege coming in, filling some shoes that it have been vacant for a while really in Arkansas. Nolan Richardson's protege coming in as a first-year coach. He's got a pretty good cupboard. I mean, the cupboard was not bare there. Great recruiting class coming in. A lot of people thought that was going to be the previous coach's saving grace, but Mike Anderson with the Arkansas Razorbacks.
And this is one that is really interesting to me. I like Mike Anderson. I like his style of play. I like that he's bringing some excitement back to Arkansas. Even though I'm a John Pelfrey guy, I've got to put that out front. But Mike Anderson is coming in, and he was able to keep intact a really good recruiting class, and we'll probably run down those players in a minute. But Arkansas still has Marshawn Powell coming back, who I know he's had some injuries, but if you remember back a couple years ago when he was a freshman, he looked like he was going to be a double-double type of guy every night. One big thing, though, that they've got to overcome is losing Rodney Clark. Rodney decided to transfer after the coaching change. I know Mike Anderson, I believe, tried to keep him, couldn't. So you're losing 15 points a game and a dead-eye shooter in Rodney Clark.
Yeah, I think the story with them are they signed a top 10 recruiting class. They're kind of going the Kentucky route of, hey, we got to get some guys, throw them in the fire, and see how they do. Now they've got Marshawn Powell, like you said, and I think he's a very solid player, and he can be leaned on. But it's really, how are these kids going to pan out? I mean, they've got B.J. Young, Kai Madden, Hunter Mickelson, Devontae Abron and Aaron Ross. So that's 5 guys all in the top 150 in recruiting. If you get a couple of those to pan out, then all of a sudden you're talking about a team that can compete for for an SEC. I don't know if you can say title, but yeah, I mean, I guess you can, because in basketball it's about being hot at the end, and you can win with freshmen.
Yeah, and Mike Anderson. I mean, there's going to be some little gusto back into the program. I mean, I think people will be excited. It was actually saw a quote from him that was actually in here. His whole famed 40 minutes of hell that Nolan Richardson would always throw on, and he said it's going to take time. He said it could be 25 minutes of hell where we're really getting after people in 15 minutes and we don't know what the heck we're doing. So, but he's going to get it right there, and I think that's why Arkansas kind of went out and did that. I think they're going to have to rely heavily on Nobles, who's he's got some experience. I mean, he's the guard. I never can say his first name, Julius or whatever it is, but he's a pretty good player. And then they also kind of got an unsung guy in Sanchez that I thought played pretty decent last year.
He did
on a couple of things, but I think with the recruiting class with Mike Anderson, you never know what can happen. They're going to get after you.
Sanchez, that was always funny. I mean, you just don't think of a kid with a last name Sanchez being a good basketball player, and he'd get in there and
or a good Jets quarterback. I mean.
Yeah, but no, he was.
There might be some truth to that.
A solid post player for him, and I'll also say this: I love the Mike Anderson hire. Arkansas fan base basketball, they're unrivaled except by Kentucky, of course. But I'm telling you, I remember a few years back, you having the tournament here, the SEC tournament here, Arkansas. I mean, everybody knows the Big Blue. I mean, they take over just in sheer number. But I'm telling you, Arkansas can travel. They love basketball. They love their team. And you just hear them calling the Hogs. And that's a team that, I mean, that's a fan base that can get behind Mike Anderson.
Yeah.
And I think that Arkansas is on the way back.
And to be honest with you, we kind of have this theme of where people get hired and you're like, man, that's a big hit. And I thought John Pelfrey was that hit.
Yeah.
I thought he was going to a place that, I mean, you walk into Arkansas and you walk into that 19,000-seat arena. I mean, that place – when they get it, and it was embarrassing last year. I mean, they were having less than 10,000 people show up for a basketball game, which is insane. And I don't know, I don't really understand what happened. I mean, it just didn't work for him. But I think Mike Anderson will definitely get that excitement back in. So it's going to be a tough place to play.
Yeah, I think what to expect out of Arkansas this year is there's going to be some growing pains early, but let them get 20 games under their belt. Now, I'd like to see them head in the right direction, because the SEC as a whole is better when Arkansas is good.
Much needed for the West.
Yeah, and we'll stay in the West again. I said we're going to flip-flop back and forth, it seems like, but we are going to do double duty in the West and stay with Blair's getting excited here. He's our Mississippi State Bulldogs. Lead us off.
I'm more excited than Drew is about Tennessee. I can tell you that much.
Should be.
No, I'm pretty interested to see how this works out. I mean, State moved into a nice $12 million practice facility where Stansbury could probably just leave everything that's ever happened into his other office, and he can just move and kind of start fresh. Because, I mean, everything comes down to Mississippi State this year with Renardo Sidney, Hawaiian Punch himself. But that's really where it's going to kind of start and end. But the good thing about it is I think this team is going to have a total different chemistry than what was apparent last year. It's kind of a disaster from the beginning with DeBost and Sidney being suspended for 9+ games and having to try to do your non-conference schedule accordingly to try to get them back into some games. And we ended up playing 5 games in 5 days, which ended up being a disaster. 1 in the Bahamas, 3 in Hawaii, and then 1 in Las Vegas. I mean, it was kind of insane. So, but I really like this group. I mean, you got DeBost, who's I think arguably one of the top 5 or 6 players in the conference, and we're going to have Sidney. I'm interested to see what he's going to do, what kind of shape he's in. They're saying that he's going to be better. One of the big keys is Arnett Moultrie, who is a transfer from UTEP that has actually played high school ball in Memphis. He's about 6'11", can put it on the floor, is an unbelievable rebounder. He sat out last year, and Stansbury always referenced that he was the best player that they actually had in practice. So I'm really looking forward to him. I think what he's going to do is from the standpoint of what is being told, is that he's kind of an all energy guy, and it can only be helpful for Sydney. That kind of can keep him pushed. That you can't take anything out off from that standpoint. And then Stansbury had one of his better recruiting classes. I mean, he's got two kids. He's already sent one kid packing. He didn't even last about 3 weeks, but and he was a parade All-American. But the Rodney
Who was that?
Hood, that was DJ Gardner from Oklahoma. He's I think going somewhere. I'm forgetting where he actually transferred to, but he kind of did one of the Twitter episodes after he got back from Europe and didn't play that much in their little deal. But
Twitter will get you in trouble.
It will. But Rodney Hood is a 6'8" kid from Meridian, Mississippi that is 5-star that he'll play from day one. Just a swing guy that can put the ball on the floor and go to the hoop. And then they got a little point guard, DeVell Smith, who's just a little jitterbug. They said he's just all over the place. So I think it's going to be a little bit of a different story. The thing that killed Mississippi State last year is once you got the ball out of D-Boss's hand, nobody could break down and take you off the dribble. We had no dribble penetration. We had spot-up shooters that couldn't handle the ball, and this year we got totally different. So it could be one of those things where I think Stansbury's got one of the better teams. It's just kind of if they can kind of get this thing going, I think they could be one of the surprise teams in the SEC.
Now that fight in Hawaii, Sydney won that fight, didn't he? Mm-hmm. That's good at least, right? If you're gonna fight, you might as well win it.
Should, man.
Well, he was on the higher bleacher though, right?
Yeah.
So I mean,
It's got to be huge.
He had a better angle, much better angle. But they lose Rayburn Johnson and Cody Augustus, I believe, is gone this year. So they need to replace a little bit of scoring there, but D-Ball should be able to pick up the slack, and Sydney can get in shape. I'd like to see what he turns out to be.
Well, I'll just have to say, I'm not a guy that knows the backstory on a lot of these players, but, man, this is some good stuff. I hope you guys are listening and enjoying this. These guys know their basketball. I'll say that. You can tell they really, really like their basketball because the knowledge that they have about these players is just phenomenal, and I appreciate it. It makes me a better person to know all this stuff as far as on the podcast. So I want to thank you guys right now because this is some good stuff, and you guys listening to this better be enjoying this. So we're going to keep moving.
Ending the podcast, or
no?
We're keep going?
Before we get to
we're
the
not
number
nearly
one,
to our hour and a half that we normally hit.
We're getting close. We're not even to number one yet. We can't stop without getting there. You know that.
Let's just end it, man. We've already talked about Tennessee, and Mississippi State.
Who else is there to talk about? Yeah.
How about Alabama? We hadn't talked about them.
Right into it. What a great segue there, Drew.
I'm pumped about their coach, man. I love this team last year. Anthony Grant. I mean, how can you not get behind this guy? He's just a wonderful coach, and then also returning Jermichael Green, which is going to be a all-SEC player. That's a guy to watch out for. Can lead the team. Trevor Relaford back again. He was a freshman sensation last year. I'm excited about their team. I think this was a team that it was such a tale of two halves last year. I mean, they looked really bad in their out-of-conference schedule. And then what did they finish? 12-4, 11-4. 12-4 in the SEC, and that's what you have to realize is, the SEC West is down, but you still have to play everybody in the East as well. Yeah. So that 12-4, you got to be a good team to go 12-4.
That's right.
I thought they should have made the tournament last year. They left on the bubble.
Yeah, and the problem was they lost a couple of games in conference that they needed to be 13-3, and they lost a couple of those. And I mean, the West was so bad last year. I mean, Mississippi State was an absolute disaster, and they finished with a 9-7 record and second in the West. I mean, it just tells you how bad the West was. I still think you go 12-4 in the SEC, you should get in the tournament.
Yeah,
I'm with you on that. 12-4 should be good enough to get it done, but Alabama's overall resume, it just didn't stack up to some of the other out-of-conference teams. And I think it was because of their out-of-conference scheduling.
Yeah.
They just didn't have enough meat on the bone when it came to that
Didn't
out
have
of
like
conference.
an RPI of like 80 or something.
It was
like that.
ridiculous, whatever it was.
Yeah, but I mean, add back in, like I said, and I've totally failed to mention Tony Mitchell, who I thought was
He's your
just
glue guy.
a very underrated player. I mean, this guy, he took over some games, and you wouldn't think that's, he doesn't have to do that because he's not, he's not the point guard and he's not their number one player like a JaMychal Green. But I mean, he is such a good addition. And I'm telling you, here's what you got to worry about, Mississippi State guy. You get that, and you throw in the 5th-ranked recruiting class.
Nice.
I mean, they're adding 6 new players, and 4 of them being in the top 100. Somebody's going to pan out. That's just all there is to it. With Trevor Lacey and Levi Randolph leading that.
Yeah, that Nick Jacobs kid's supposed to be pretty good too. 6'9" kid.
Yeah, so I'm pumped for that team, and I think that's somebody to watch for. And I apologize. We've talked a little bit about basketball on this podcast. And I agree. I think Mississippi State has the talent to be the team to beat, but man, Alabama returns a lot.
Yeah, on paper, I really like Alabama. You mentioned JaMychal Green, Tony Mitchell. It's funny looking back at last year's stats. JaMychal Green, 15.5 points a game, 7.5 rebounds. Tony Mitchell, 15.2 points a game, 7.1 rebounds. He's your glue guy who really brings everything together for Alabama. When they had those tough stretches in games where they couldn't get a basket, that's who they went to, believe it or not. And I think JaMychal Green is probably one of the most, outside of the SEC, people in the SEC know him, and they like him. But I think he's underrated nationwide. A lot of people outside of the South don't know how good JaMychal Green really is.
The only thing that I see about Alabama that scares me somewhat is the backcourt, because I think you're going to be depending on freshmen, and I think you got Relaford, and Relaford is kind of one of those guys that's streaky. He kind of reminds me of the big leaper that they had. The little guard that was left-handed that they had. I can't even think of his name off the top of my head. But he's kind of one of those guys that's a scorer, and he's not really kind of a kid that's going to dish and set up other people. And so point guard in their backcourt is the only thing that can kind of – they're going to be good. But I think that's one thing when we get in SEC play is to kind of watch out and see how that develops over the year. I
agree, but he was a freshman last year, so hopefully did some growing up over the summer. The guy that I'm interested in seeing is Trevor Lacey. He was actually a recruit that Kentucky went after pretty hard. A lot of the Kentucky fans out there are going to recognize that name. But Trevor Lacey got away. He was a kid in high school who was averaging, 40-something points a game. You would look, and every once in a while he would drop a 50-point game. So that's a guy who could possibly be instant offense coming in. He's a shooter. And he just knows how to put the ball in the basket. So,
and I'll tell you, don't underestimate those guys. I remember a local kid, and we'll talk about him in a minute, John Jenkins. I mean, he was a guy that scored,
lights out.
He was averaging 40-something a game, and he had some 50-point games. And I actually watched him play some high school games, and it translates. I mean, it's hard to. I don't care how bad your competition is.
A pure shooter is a pure shooter.
Yeah, if you can shoot, in high school. I mean, the rim's the same diameter,
same distance,
use the same ball.
It's a lot easier to shoot when you got some studs down low like they've got. I mean, they've got JaMychal Green.
And they need that. I mean, that's one of the things that I think Alabama was weak in last year was shooting. They, they hit some threes, but I think their leading three-point shooter was around 30-something%.
Yeah, who would mess with Anthony Grant? That guy's just a stud, man.
Yeah, that's
tough.
I
I wouldn't want to be on the wrong end of that conversation.
It's hard not to like him.
Yeah,
he's a guy who looks like he just oozes class. I mean, he's got the class, he's got the charisma, and he's a top-notch coach. So
I'm glad he got his chance in the SEC because wasn't he was pretty much taking over for Florida when Donovan was going to the Magic.
And then
right?
he
went to VCU.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think I talked about this last year. I think my very first blog post I talked about that we wrote for the website. I talked about the different teams, and I kind of pumped up Anthony Grant then. So it's hard for me to like anything Alabama, but he's a good coach. They got a good one.
Let me throw something out there. We were talking about last year. One of their biggest problems was their non-SEC schedule, and if you look at it, it's pretty weak again this year. I mean, they've got Georgetown, who's not ranked in the top 25 this year, but I mean it's a Big East team, and you also have Kansas State, who's ranked 21st preseason. But other than that, you've got another team that must have done something. They made a deal with the devil because they're playing everybody in the SEC preseason, and that's Oakland. They're playing Oakland too. So I think Tennessee, Arkansas, and Alabama all have Oakland. So, but you look at it, they've got a pretty soft non-conference schedule.
Well,
is that going to hurt them in a SEC West that's improved over last year?
Yeah. There is one thing that I do like. Instead of playing a lot of powder puffs, they're mixing in a Maryland. They're mixing in a Oklahoma State. They're mixing in Georgia Tech. So there's some teams out there that are they may not be a top 25 team, but they're going to help out that RPI at the end of the season.
I agree. That's exactly the point I was going to make as well. VCU. I mean, we all know what VCU did, and they've still got Shaka Smart. So
you'd take him, wouldn't you?
Yeah. Well, yeah.
You wanted him, didn't you?
I did want him. I thought he'd be a good coach. But so yeah, I mean, when without looking at a preseason ranking, when I see Maryland, Georgetown, Georgia Tech. I mean, those are storied schools right there.
Those are teams that aren't going to hurt you when it comes down to
absolutely
RPIs.
Not.
And
throw in a VCU and a Oakland. I mean, that's two very tough mid-major teams.
Okay, I was just throwing it out there.
You're right.
That's a good point.
One of the things that
it's no Tennessee pre-conference schedule.
Another thing that we're not looking at is some of those pre-conference or
tournaments,
early season tournaments. Yeah, you got the preseason NIT, you've got the Maui Invitational, and there's some games out there that may not necessarily show up on a schedule right now.
That might end up happening because of the winds. Yeah,
sure.
Good point. I just wanted to throw that out there and see what you all thought about that. Well, I said we were going to flip flop, and we ended up doing 3 teams in the West. I think that just shows how much stronger the East is, and that's the way it's been for a number of years. So the remaining teams are going to be coming from the East, and I believe next on my list is it the Florida Gators?
That's right.
Absolutely.
Florida is one of those teams that you look at and you say, wow, they lost a lot, but at the same time they kept a lot. I mean, they do lose Chandler Parson, Vernon Macklin, and Alex Tyus, but they hang on to their Kenny Boynton and Irving Walker. Throw in Patrick Young, who I think is going to be a stud. That guy is built. He came in as a freshman and he was just jacked. He looked like he was NBA ready. So that guy's going to be good. And I like not to throw a bunch of names, but Mike Rosario. He was the transfer, I believe, from out of Rutgers. Yeah, and that's a guy who was averaging. He was up there near 20 points a game when he was at Rutgers. So he'll be a good pickup for them to get some scoring.
Yeah, I agree. I think that it's going to be tough. The hard part is they're losing their interior players, their post players. They're bringing back possibly the most experienced backcourt with Irvin Walker and Kenny Boynton. So it's tough. I think it's a tough road to road to hoe. Is that it? Road to hoe?
Road to hoe.
Road? Can you say road to hoe? I guess that's a completely different thing. So maybe, but it's gonna be a tough road to hoe to
it's a farming reference.
Yeah, I know. It can be other references. Maybe I'll try to
road to hoe.
Road to hoe.
Yeah, we're gonna
see what that means. YouTube. But that's a tough. I think those are tough losses. But I agree exactly what Matt said.
I think we found our title.
Yeah, maybe so.
No, but I'll say one thing though. One thing that's really going to help them out is the new assistant coach they have, and that's your man Pelfrey.
Yeah.
I mean, he's very familiar with Donovan. He's very familiar with that system. So I mean, if anything, you've got basically 2 head coaches there that's coming in. So that's really going to provide a lot of extra depth on the bench as far as from the coaching standpoint. That's going to help Florida out.
They also got Norm Roberts, who was at St. John's. That shows here, and then Matt McCall, who he basically kind of promoted up, but. That's Pelfrey and that guy that kind of brings in when you lost your coaching staff there.
Yeah, and that's what I kind of agree. I think they're gonna depend on Patrick Young quite a bit, and that's a guy that everybody likes as far as his size and what he can do. But we have to remember this guy only played around 18 minutes a game last year. He didn't have to be the guy, and you never know if he will become the guy.
Yeah, you just hope, that's a guy who was a McDonald's All-American. And, yeah, he didn't play a lot, but, again, the reason that he didn't play a lot is because you had Vernon Macklin, Alex Tice, and Chandler Parsons out there filling those roles. So with that opening up, I think that's a kid who's going to play 30-plus minutes a game, hopefully, if he can stay out of foul trouble.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the one thing that it just keeps jumping out at me is Macklin, Parsons. I mean, Parsons was 6'11" and can do anything with a basketball. And then Tyus, that was 32 points and 19.4 boards a game. So that's a big hole to fill. But I do think that. I think the Eric Murphy kid, who's the big 6'10" kid, he's got to obviously step up from that standpoint. And I think the kid from Rutgers has got to. I think they're going to be very guard heavy, so it's going to be a little bit of a different scenario from Donovan. But Donovan's going to have them ready to roll.
But you can win with the guards in the NCAA.
Sure, and don't I'd be remiss if we didn't mention Brad Beal, who's coming in, top five recruit in the nation. And as we've seen it with a Kentucky fan, I think a couple years ago the top two players in the SEC were John Wall and DeMarcus Cousins. And so when you're just looking at what they return, it's hard to predict. But when you can get those top 5, top 10 players in the country, you got to be excited about that.
Yeah, let me add something about Brad Beal. I watched him in the McDonald's All-American game, and he's one of those kids you can tell is just playing on another level. He can shoot, and he can also put the ball on the floor and get to the rack. He's athletic enough that he'll be able to do that in college. He's an instant difference maker on the college level, so I like what he brings to the table.
All right. I think that's good for Florida. All right.
Works for me.
Doesn't Eric Murphy look like a guy who should play for Duke?
Eric Murphy, no, isn't that the kid from Entourage?
I think E.
Yeah, E. Well, all right, let's break down
Entourage
basketball players.
Last season.
I'm not excited about Eric Murphy. He's about 4'7", so and maybe he can shoot, but that's going to be tough. It's like Muggsy
red
Bogues.
hair. Yeah.
Drama, I'd probably be most excited about Drama. Maybe Turtle can bang. The not skinny Turtle though. So
yeah, you need fat turtle.
We have
old
turtle.
Yeah. All right.
And who cares about Vince?
Yeah,
Vince looks like he should
horrible.
play for Vanderbilt, who's the next team we're going to talk about with the hair.
Vanderbilt Commodores, man. Get excited, West End. You got a football coach that
ready to start fights.
He's feisty. If you listen to the last podcast, I tried to rip into co-host Chad Caldwell, saying it's time, man. It's time if you're a Vanderbilt fan to start coming to games. I'm going to jump before we talk about basketball. It's something Shane, you sent me some stats. It had all SEC and the numbers, and it had all kinds of
the attendance,
everything. Yeah. And you look at the attendance, and for a team with the smallest stadium to only be getting a little less, I think, or right around 80% capacity. That's just, that's not going to cut it, and that's what I'm talking about when I say. And
I would say a good 60 to 70% of that's the opposing teams.
Yeah, exactly. So but it's an exciting time to be a Vanderbilt Commodore fan. They, in my opinion, have the best or one of the best baseball programs in the country. It's tough to say the best when you've got teams like South Carolina, but they have one of the best baseball programs in the country. Their football's on the up and up. I think their women won a bowling national championship a few years ago. And then on to basketball, they return solid players. We talked about this. They return 3 guys that could be preseason All SEC. They might be. I don't know if that poll's already out.
They're on the Naismith watch list.
Yeah.
I'm guessing that'll come out next week. SEC Media Days is next Wednesday or Thursday.
Yeah, so that should be coming out.
I'll see it then.
Festus Ezeli, which we'll hit on pretty quick. This is a 6-game suspension.
Yeah.
For taking a hotel room and some food, which is pretty harsh. We kind of admitted, we were talking about beforehand.
But you like the Vandy guys getting those suspensions, right?
Well, yes and no. Last year, yes, when they were competing, when Tennessee had to compete with them. Now I don't think Tennessee's competing. So as an SEC fan, and like I said last week, I don't hate other teams. I want Vandy to do good. I hated, I wanted Kentucky and Vandy to do bad last year when it helps my team. But I pull for them. I want them to do good. I hope Vandy wins the national championship this year.
It only helps your RPI, right?
Well, yeah. Well, our RPI is not going to make a difference this year. But Festus Ezeli, just the diamond in the rough out of Nigeria. This kid has improved every year, and he could be something special. Clearly, the other guys you're talking about are John Jenkins, who is my pick for the preseason SEC Player of the Year. I think you pick it. You can make a case for some other players, but you can make a strong case for him. this guy is a pure shooter and a pure scorer, and now a junior this year. He's going to play a big role. And then you've got my buddy Jefferson Taylor, also a junior that can play. So I'm excited. Add in, Rod Odom played some good minutes for him last year. freshman Dejon Parker at their Midnight Madness. He won the dunk contest. That's an athletic kid coming in as a freshman. They still have Brad Tinsley. That's a guy that I think seems like he'd be a horrible basketball player, but he contributes. He's a
I think that's the thing that actually takes Vanderbilt to the next level is Brad Tinsley had to come over and play point guard last year. After Bill left, and I think that's one of the problems that they had because he did good, and they were a solid team. But I think the kid coming in this year, which is I want to say Kedron Johnson, who they say is, he's a 6'4", 6'5",
kind of built like a little tank.
Yeah, and they say he's just a physical player, but he's a true point guard, which will allow him to slide over into that off guard slot. But I think the whole key to him is, just think about this: you got Goulburn, you got
Chingang,
whatever you say his last name, I always mess it up.
Kyle Fuller played some minutes for him last year.
You said Odom. Odom.
I don't think they lost anybody. I don't think they lost anybody, did they?
Here's what I wrote down before I came over. Key losses for Vanderbilt, none.
Yeah.
They don't have any.
They
didn't lose anybody.
Just first round again at the NCAA?
Yeah.
That's the only thing they lost is a tournament game,
which blows my mind yet again that they would do that.
Well, and I think that came back to the lack of true point guard play, and when you get in the tournament, that's where teams like we were talking about with Alabama, where you got to see that progression over the course of the year because it's one of those things that in Vanderbilt, to be honest with you, if the light goes on for Jeffrey Taylor to be consistent ball game.
Agreed.
They will be unstoppable almost. That kid can take them to a level that they've never been at. And the problem with it, he's still kind of been that inconsistent kid. But, he could come out, this last year and just completely light it on fire. But, with Festus and all that, they just got a stacked team, man.
Well, and here's the thing about them. Any player that can step up and take pressure off Jenkins is only going to make him better. Because there were some games, we went to quite a few Vanderbilt games last year, and Matt, I know you have season tickets. Even though you're a Kentucky fan, you just love college basketball. Jenkins, there are times that they try to take him out of the game, put your best player on him. I think you have to do that. But they were trying to say, hey, Jeff Taylor, beat us.
Yeah.
And a lot of times he couldn't do it. What was that? I think it was the Western game we went to last year, and it was a close game, way too late. And the talent was overwhelming on Vanderbilt's side, and they
just take the 3 games in the SEC tournament where they rolled off the 3 wins, and he actually averages over 20 points in 3 straight games. They go into the first round, he has 4 points in the first round, and they lose.
And that's been the knock on him for the last couple years. He's athletic as all get out. He can do anything on the basketball court that you ask him to, and he's just been too inconsistent.
Yeah.
He'll disappear at times, and quite frankly, times when they really need him to step up. So, but Vandy's ranked by CBS as the number 7 team coming in this year. So there's some high expectations there for Vanderbilt. And as Drew mentioned, I do have season tickets because I'm a huge basketball fan, and I'm excited about this season. I'm going to go to more games this year than probably ever before on my previous seasons because they're returning exciting guys like John Jenkins, Festus Ezeli, Jeffrey Taylor. I just think that they've got enough depth there. Blair, you mentioned the depth. You're running out there with guys like Goulburn and Chingang and stuff like that. So I think that they've got what it takes to cause some problems.
Yeah. And what about Kevin Stallings, man? It was 4 years ago that he had to go to the NCAA tournament when he made that Sweet 16 run in like 07 or whatever it was. He was losing his job. And he is consistently recruited well, and he is an unbelievable floor coach. Y'all probably won't like this, but if you put him, I think, with a Vanderbilt team and put him in a game situation against Calipari, I think he outcoaches him. I just don't think he's ever had the horses to go with him. That's
you agree with that? We've talked about that.
That's just
for those listening on audio. We've got a Kentucky fan over here, Matt's just shaking his head now.
No, but we had that exact conversation about Bruce Pearl and John Calipari. Their actual floor coaching was not their strong point. And I'd rather have Calipari for the other.
I disagree with that because he's always been had the knock of him of he just rolls the ball out there, and we'll get to Kentucky here in just a minute, so don't get me started. But he's a very good in-game coach, and I think he showed that last year with the games against Ohio State and North Carolina. 2 games that we were not favored in. So he was able to get it done then. But back to Vandy for a second. I like John Jenkins as one of the he's a preseason All-American this year. So he's got a lot to live up to, and I think he's going to do it. He's going to get you another 20-plus points a game this season.
I think he's a taller and a better Chris Lofton because I think he's developed his game where he was just a shooter as a freshman. He's put the ball on the floor last year, and I think he's just consistently getting better. So he's more difficult to guard, so it's hard to kind of just put somebody on him and just say, okay, you're not going to be able to touch it and kind of eliminate him. I think he's getting better from that standpoint, but it's also nice to have 8 other studs on your team like they do. I mean, they're just loaded.
And I like that. I like that comparison. The difference being it was Lofton's junior season when he figured out, hey, put it on the floor and became a complete player. His senior season was just, he had cancer, so I mean that was a little tougher to play. But they're both. I mean, they are both just dead eye shooters. About as good as you can get, and the difference is John Jenkins did that in his sophomore year, started putting the ball on the floor, and I can't wait to see what he does it in his junior year.
Yeah,
and we might be actually talking about Vanderbilt might have a kid that leaves early to go pro. Whoever thought that would happen?
Yeah. The NBA always needs shooters.
If there is an NBA,
Well, he's at least he got this season. He doesn't have to worry about it this season, right? They'll get him. They'll get it done sometime this year,
maybe.
right?
Who knows? It doesn't look that way right now, but.
Well, we'll talk about a team now that's pretty much number one in most categories that you look at. Number one recruiting class coming in, second year in a row. Third year in a row. SEC preseason number one.
That's right.
And I guess preseason ranked number 2 in most of the polls out there, and that's the Kentucky Wildcats. And Matt, we're just going to defer the mic to you for a minute and let you have your day in the sun.
Okay. Moment that we've all been waiting for. Kentucky Wildcats coming back strong this year. You look at me and you say, hey, Matt, this is a team that lost guys like Brandon Knight, DeAndre Liggins, Josh Harrelson, Enos Kanter. Although he didn't play, he was a top draft pick.
Y'all still claim him. That's unbelievable. The guy y'all tried to pay him to come to school, got caught, and sat him on the bench like that was okay.
I expect
key losses. He did. I want to let everybody know on YouTube. He wrote Enos Kanter as a key loss
and put 2 stars by his name because he would have been a stud and with a HR line.
Yeah, would have been.
Here's the thing. We love him. Free Enos. But how do you replace those guys? You do it with the number 1 overall class. Bring in 4 McDonald's All-Americans, and this is a thing. I won't say unprecedented because it seems to happen every year now. But we're coming in this year. Let's start with our freshmen that are coming in. You've got Anthony Davis, who a lot of people, if you go to the NBA sites, I know there's no NBA right now, but they've got him as the number 1 overall draft pick next year. So you've got that coming in as a freshman. He's 6'10", 6'11", out of Chicago, and he's just going to be a force to be reckoned with on the defensive end especially, and he's got a lot of offensive skill as well, so he's not a project by any means. You've got a point guard in Marcus Teague who's coming in, who's going to be the next in that long fabled lineage of Calipari point guards. He's in to replace Brandon Knight. You've also got Michael Kidd Gilchrist, who a lot of people are saying is a more spectacular DeAndre Liggins. He's going to give you that effort on both ends of the floor. He can score, but he's known as a defensive stopper. So he could be that defensive guy that every team lacks or wants, to put on the opposing team's best player. Along with that, you've got a kid, Kyle Wiltjer, out of Portland, Oregon. Another McDonald's All-American, a little less known, but he's 6'9", and he can actually stretch the floor out. He can shoot the 3, and he's got some good post moves as well, so he can get in there and mix it up. But
and this is what I thought you should have led with, because different than as opposed to the last couple years, it's not all about what they're bringing in. For the first time, they're keeping some of these guys, and one guy in particular that in my opinion, should have gone pro, but decided, like the Harrison Barnes and the Jared Sullingers, that they wanted to play college. In Terrence Jones.
And this is one of the things that Kentucky fans and probably John Calipari himself, even though he might not admit it, this is one of the things he's been waiting for, is to get some of those guys to come back for a second year. And after seeing a little bit of practice and from Big Blue Madness the other night, Terrence Jones is bigger, faster, and stronger this year. I mean, he's added muscle. He's playing like he should have been playing at the end of last season. I know he tailed off a little bit there at the end. But Terrence Jones, make no mistake about it, he should be on that first-team All-American list this year, even though they have him down on the second. So he's going to be back. He's going to give you your scoring and your rebounding, and I think some of the pressure is going to be alleviated now that you have guys like Anthony Davis on the inside and Kyle Wiltjer to help him out. But let's not forget guys like Deron Lamb. Everybody knows Lamb shot about 48% from three-point range last year. So you've got him coming back. So you've got a 1-2 scoring punch right there, and then you add in the senior Darius Miller, who I think is going to be really strong this year. Might surprise some people out there, but he'll be back for his senior season, and we're excited about that.
I'm thinking I was going to piggyback right off of what Drew said. I mean, it's really going to be, you got Darius Miller, who I think is a key. I think he's just one of those glue guys that can kind of do a lot of things. He can play all three guard spots for you. And I think Deron Lamb and the Terrence Jones, I think Jones, they said, is up to like 250 now.
Yeah.
So I mean, he's going to be a beast, but I do think that's the kind of the key to this whole thing, is that you actually, for the first time, have a little bit of the youth that's coming in, but also have some of that the experience that's there that's better than the experience that you may have had in the last 2 years.
Well, one other thing is we've also got a transfer at Kentucky this year from Mississippi State.
Yeah, 20 Beckham. He was actually from Louisville. I mean, he played there
Kentucky
in Louisville, and he's a big kid. He's like 6'5", lefty. He's not going to score. He's going to be more kind of a defensive
off the bench.
Yeah, and he'll probably just spell the freshman kid is what he'll be there for. But I'm interested to see how healthy he is. He missed a whole year at Mississippi State because he had a strange hip issues where he had to have one hip done. It's some type of surgery, had to wait 6 months and had the other one done. So he sat out a whole year at Mississippi State. So he should be ready, I think, in January. But he's a good kid. I mean, he's big and long. I mean,
look good in practice.
Let me ask you just a quick little quiz game. Matt, question for you. In your opinion, what is the most important position for on the court for Kentucky's offense?
For Kentucky's offense, I'm going to say in years past, it was the point guard spot.
Yeah, and that's my point, is absolutely a home run with John Wall, who's one of the best. I mean, I think he was the best college basketball player 2 years ago, if not one of the best freshmen. I put him up there with Carmelo Anthony for Syracuse. You probably have to put DeMarcus Cousins up there too. He was an unbelievable player. Last year, hit another home run with Brandon Knight coming in and being able to be the team leader. I think this offense needs that puts a lot of pressure on Teague, does it not? I mean,
it does.
It's a tough one because, I mean, if they miss with Teague, that's the only thing. I don't think you're going to – when I say maybe Kentucky doesn't live up to expectations, that means they go to the Elite Eight as opposed to the Final Four. The talent's way, way too good. But the only scary thing for me, if I was a Kentucky fan, is that's a lot of pressure to put on a guy that has never played at this competition. And for Kentucky we're not talking about, once again, a successful season making the tournament. We're talking about you got to start winning national championships or keep going to Final Fours, and that's a lot of pressure to put on a guy.
Yeah, I agree. I think a Final Four is expected this year by most Kentucky fans. We'd like a national championship, but we know that that's not a given by any means. But here's the difference
Unless
between
you listen to your Blue Cat radio after the game.
Well, you take any fan base and you're going to get.
Well, I understand.
Stuff.
My father-in-law is a Louisville fan, so we get to listen to that lots.
Here's the deal. In respect to your question about the point guard play, in the past couple of years, John Wall was required to be our leading scorer. Brandon Knight, by default, was our leading scorer because Terrence Jones kind of fell off towards the end of the year. Marcus Teague is not going to be asked to get you 20 points a game. You've got guys down low and outside, kind of all over the place who can score the ball for you. So I think what he's going to be is he's going to be a facilitator, but he's also going to be a guy who can get to the rim. We don't need him to get us 20 points a game, but on any given night, I think he can, and I think he's going to be more of a kind of a hybrid.
I mean, this is going to be more like 2 years ago. I mean, last year was somewhat of an anomaly. You looked for Harrelson to come in and have to provide something down low, and he was able to do that, pretty well, better than anyone ever expected. But this year, you've got two guys coming in that's going to be down there to really relieve that pressure off of Teague that you didn't have last year.
That's right.
I guess my thing is not only looking at the last 2 years. Look at Calipari's teams before that.
4 years in a
Derrick
row.
Rose. It's just been
Tariq
unbelievable.
Evans.
And Tariq Evans.
Yeah.
So my question is, let's say this kid comes in and isn't the scorer that you want him to be, and all honesty, let's say he's not ready to be just the team leader that a point guard has to be. Not saying that I think Kentucky's not going to make the tournament. Yeah. I'm just saying that it takes a team that in Athlon magazine they're predicting to be runner-up, national champions runner-up. When you take away the most important position and it's an unknown, that would be my one concern with Kentucky.
Yeah, and I think what they're doing as kind of plan B is they're working in Deron Lamb at point guard. So you'll see some of him. They even said Darius Miller could mix in and fill in at point guard, and then you've got Tawani Beckham coming in January, who's probably more of a true point guard who will play some backup there for us. So yeah, while it may be a question mark, I'll take the number 6 overall player any day at my as my starting point guard.
And in all honesty, that's the answer I'm looking for. Is it's good to know that they've got those plans, because Deron Lamb can do it. I mean,
sure.
he's not the ball handler and he's not as quick as the past 2 point guards, but he's a scorer that can go in and
yeah. And I thought last year that I just went blank on the point guard.
Brandon
Knight.
Yeah.
I thought last year he was going to be the guy that was not in the mold of the other 3 and that could kind of struggle, but he ended up being. He ended up being a very intelligent player. He ended up being very long, and he ended up being a very competitive kid, a lot more competitive than I thought he would be. I mean, and then by the end of the year, he was, he was a stud, and he really carried them for a lot of the that end. So, Calipari's done it, but it is if one of these you got 4 of them in here, and all of a sudden 2 of them don't hit. Then all of a sudden you're sitting there going, okay, this might be the one that doesn't hit that kind of takes you back for a step. But
yeah, the key this year is the depth. I mean, it's tough when you're running 6 guys out there all season long like we did last year. If you can get 8 or 9 in the rotation, which I think is the plan, then hopefully get some contribution from some areas that you might not expect. That's what Calipari's really looking for, to fill in those in-between times, the lean times when the ball's not going through the hoop, or you got some guys in foul trouble. You need some other guys to step up, like we were talking about with Vanderbilt earlier.
Well, here's a question for you. Do you think that with the NBA lockout, can you not see like LeBron James and a bunch of NBA players? And I don't get this. These guys that have no affiliation with Kentucky coming out there and supporting, the program, that can be huge. I mean, that's what's unbelievable. Is wasn't it Magic Johnson that came and
Magic Johnson, LeBron James. There's been a few other stars out there. Mike Tomlin from Pittsburgh Steelers, but. The thing that you might not know if you don't keep up with it, a lot of the NBA players have been coming to Lexington even now to practice and train.
Puerto Rico.
Well, not only that, you had Kevin Durant and the Oklahoma City Thunder come and use the facilities. Then you had them followed up by the Boston Celtics coming there just to practice, only because each team has a Kentucky player that has affiliation. But you've had that going on in Lexington all summer long, so I mean you can see NBA players walking around campus right now.
Come to Knoxville, guys, man. We got awesome facilities as well, and the Rocky Top Summer League, man. I'll get Kevin Durant in that thing.
I'm not sure what that is.
Yeah, you do. You love it.
Well, with that, we're going to end this thing. We do want to thank everyone for tuning in, and just like our normal podcasts, we're going to throw it around the room, open mic, so to speak. Any topic you want to choose, and Blair, we're going to start with you. Any closing comments? Basketball, football, sports, non-sports? It's all you, man. And don't forget your Twitter.
Yeah, at Blair Smyly, SMYLY. The thing that I'm actually looking forward to, this basketball season to kind of see what unfolds, because I think there's about 5 or 6 to 7 teams that have a shot if they kind of the way these divisions fall, that can actually make a run for the tournament. So I'll be interested to see kind of how it works. I mean, it's not the Big East. I mean, the Big East is kind of a different animal because the East Coast is more basketball heavy than obviously the Southeast, and football is just more important on the East Coast. So they're going to be a little bit more traditional from that standpoint, but I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, at Drew Young 20 is the Twitter handle. I agree with Blair. I'm excited about the basketball season coming up. I think you've got 2 teams that really can compete for a national championship in Kentucky and Vanderbilt, and then I think you've got Florida, Alabama, Mississippi State, 3 other teams that are pretty solid. And in the past we've talked about the SEC kind of being down last year and only having maybe they thought they were only going to get 4. I think they got 5 into the tournament last year, but I think it's a kind of a rebound year for the SEC, and I think it's only going to get better. And besides the ACC, when they add the cream of the crop from the Big East, I think the SEC is going to be a power in basketball as well as football soon.
There's no question what I'm looking forward to. I'm looking forward to hanging banner number 8 in Rupp Arena. So glad that football season is finally over.
Season's over.
It's been a tough one. glad we can welcome in basketball season with Midnight Madness last week.
You got a Twitter or anything like that you want to let everyone know about?
No, not really.
Okay.
Not on Twitter?
Not on Twitter.
I'm on Twitter. Don't want you following me.
Well, there you go. No love from Matt. See if he comes back. All hate mail, don't send it to me. I just want to say that I think Drew somewhat alluded to this, but, you've got a really interesting college basketball season that's getting ready to unfold. Because if this NBA lockout truly continues on and lasts well into, if the season gets canceled, we'll say worst case scenario, come February, there's nothing else on. Now, nobody watches the NBA till late April anyways, but talk about the extra excitement that you're going to have in the college level, and you've got an SEC basketball program that on a whole is much better, much improved over it was last year. You got a lot of things to look forward to come basketball season. You got a powerhouse in football. You've got some programs that are really stepping up in basketball. It's going to be a great season for basketball. And with that, I'm going to say you can follow me personally at P. Shane Bailey. That's my Twitter. But also make sure you're following the roundtable. And we're going to end it with letting you know where to find us. Again, on Twitter, SECSRT is the Sports Roundtable's Twitter. We're on Facebook at SEC Sports Roundtable. You can also find us on our website, SECSRT. And then our podcasts on YouTube, same thing. It's a broken record. SECSRT is the YouTube channel. Check us out there if you want to see this ugly group of guys on video. You're more than welcome to do that. It gets posted up there. We'll also try to put links on the website, iTunes and Stitcher. Well, I'd be remiss if I didn't throw that in there one more time.
Spotify.
Yeah, Spotify. Great radio stations for free, but if you want to listen to this podcast, it's not there. Go to Stitcher or iTunes. Make sure you subscribe to either one. That way you're getting these the content new when it comes out. This is an extra podcast midweek. I'll say, Drew, be safe, have fun in Vegas. Hope you win lots.
I may not come back, Shane. If I hit like I think I will, then I'm bringing the podcast. I'm going to fly you out every week to Vegas from my villa in Vegas.
There we go. We can do that. We'll be rolling up the Southwest has direct flights, yes?
Private jet. Bro.
Private jet?
I keeps a private jet.
Rolling G4?
How you pay for that?
Straight cash, homie.
And with that, we're going to call it a night, guys. Thanks.